welcome to round two of Knockout Opportunities Measuring Your Digital Program Impacts, Telling Your Story. This is such an important topic. As we all know, we're working on grant funding, we're implementing grant funding right now. And even if you aren't doing those two things, right, this is useful. Your programs or future programs are important and their impact should be shared. So my name is Jess Epston, and I lead the Band and C program at the Institute for Emerging Issues at NC State University. And I'm so excited to be joined by other partners today. But first, I'm going to give a quick, for those of you who don't know, at Band and C, we provide technical assistance and planning capacity for local level digital inclusion planning efforts. We do this by hosting webinars like this one, peer sharing networks, and organizing statewide convenings. So my colleague Kylie Foley and I will be on the webinar today to share resources and answer questions as needed. And we are so lucky to have our amazing partners with us today from NC State's Friday Institute for Educational Innovation and from NC Central University. And now I have the pleasure of passing to Dr. Erin Emanuel to introduce everyone.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Erin Emanuel, and I'm a research associate with the peer evaluation team at the Friday Institute. I'm going to turn it over to our associate director of the peer evaluation team to introduce the other members of this session this morning. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. I'm Erin Huggins. I'm the associate director of the peer team at the Friday Institute. I'm here also today with Samantha Duke, who is one of our amazing graduate assistants in the College of Education. And I'm also here with Dr. Arazi Agbo-Gebhardt, who is an associate professor at North Carolina Central University. And so we're very excited to be here today. And Erin, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Erin. So this session is a continuation of last week's webinar about measuring your impact. So if you did not attend the session last week, no worries. We're happy that you're here with us this morning, and we hope that you will find these strategies useful as you identify ways to leverage your data to tell your story. So for today's knockout opportunities in round two, as a learner, you will examine the so what behind the numbers, assess various metrics that will enhance your messaging with the specific outcomes. And then we hope that we provide you some strategies to craft a compelling story or narrative. And lastly, we want to foster a deeper understanding of your audience and their specific needs. So once again, if you have any questions for today's session, please feel free to place those in the chat. Samantha's going to be monitoring our chat this morning, so we thank her for doing that. Next slide, please. So for today's agenda, this is just an overview. First, Arazi is going to give us the 1-2 punch with translating our data by discussing strategies related to our beloved logic model from round one and ways to identify outcomes and impact for your projects and grants. Next, Erin H. will help us leverage your data like the heavyweight you are by citing specific case study examples to help contextualize your data. She will take us through some of our work at the Friday Institute that highlights visualizing benchmarks, trends over time, using different types of data, and discussing challenges with transparency. Then we'll go into a brief activity about a crucial case example on the digital opportunity and disaster response planning, examining these types of efforts in the western region of our state with Hurricane Helene. Next, Samantha will go in for the knockout with strategies to create a succinct message. And then Jess and I will hopefully help you own the ring to identify key considerations as you tailor your message with and for Pacific audiences. Finally, Erin Huggins will leave us with encouraging words as you continue your work with the heart of a champion. Now I'm going to turn everything over to Arazi, and she's going to help us translate our data with the beloved logic model. Take it away, Arazi.
Thanks, Erin. So many organizations do incredible work in their communities and often collect data along the way. But a common challenge is figuring out how to translate that data into a compelling story about your program's impact. This webinar is going to focus on that often overlooked yet crucial aspects of your work. Next slide, please. Let's begin with a quick refresher on the logic models. If you joined our first session, then you remember we talked about logic models as a powerful tools for shaping data collection. They help us decide what to measure and when. And when translating data to show impact, you want to focus on the last two components of the logic model, outcomes and impact. That's where the story can really be told. Next slide, please. So again, just a quick refresher. We talked about the sample logic model, and here on the slide, we can see the sample logic model that shows what kind of data you can track for the different components. And inputs help you track the resources that you invested, such as staff, funding, materials. And then you have activities, which tracks what you did with or what you do with the resources, like hosting workshops or providing services. Participation or outputs tracks tangible results, like the number of participants reached, how many laptops were distributed, things like that. And then we really want to focus on that outcomes and impact aspect of the logic model. We have the short-term outcomes, which tracks immediate effects, such as knowledge gained or increased awareness about a topic. And we have medium-term outcomes, which track changes in behavior or decision-making. And finally, we have long-term outcomes, or the impact, that tracks the broader systemic changes like increased economic mobility or improved health outcomes. Next slide, please. Now let's take a look at a real-world example. Imagine there's a grant that is awarded to a senior center to recruit and train volunteer digital champions who would then deliver one-on-one and small group digital literacy training to older adults with a focus on accessing telehealth services and connecting with loved ones. Now, this organization conducted a pre-grant survey, and the data showed that 65% of seniors over 70 lacked confidence using smartphones beyond making calls, and only 15% had ever used video chat. This meant missed telehealth appointments and increased social isolation. So, what would be the inputs for a program like this? And what activities would those inputs support? You can put your responses in the chat, or you can unmute your mic. I want to hear from you. Okay, I see a response in the chat. So some inputs will be staff, yes, volunteers, curriculum, device, classroom, activities, one-on-ones, the workshops, yeah. I'm seeing more responses. Yeah, these are all on point. So when you have to think about what exactly are you trying to achieve, which we can see from the case study, and then you can think about the different inputs and activities that will be required. Some other ones that you want to think about, yeah, you have the staff that was identified as an input. An activity would be training the digital champion. So you need to have maybe a train the trainer activity. Okay, so next slide, please. What would be the outcome from this program? Let's say we get all of the inputs that we need, we implement or conduct the activities that we identified, and we run the program and it's successful. How can we measure success? So we can look at success as, say, an increase in digital literacy. If there is a post-assessment, a post-training assessment that is done and show a 70% increase in digital literacy scores, that is demonstrating short to medium-term outcome and is a compelling data point that demonstrates real impact. But let's go back to what we identified as the goal of the program, of the grant, right? Is to also increase telehealth, access to telehealth, and also increase or reduce social isolation. So when we think about the outcomes and the impact, don't just stop at increased digital literacy, but you can tie it back to that bigger picture. Are seniors now attending more telehealth appointments? Are they more socially connected? Those are your long-term outcomes and impacts that can help you craft a compelling story. Now I'm going to turn it over to Erin H. to discuss how you can leverage your data to show the impacts of your programs.
Thanks, Racy. All right, so today what we're going to focus on is actually telling your story. So let's say you've already collected your data. We want to figure out what it actually means for your community. So we're going to move beyond just reporting numbers to telling your story. As we move through this section, I'm going to be asking a lot of questions for you all to reflect on. Feel free to share your questions, your ideas, and your examples in the chat as we go along. Hopefully, we'll have some time at the end where we can actually address some of those. So we can go on to the next slide. All right, so in this Tech Connectors example, we're looking at just general metrics. Here we're seeing that the way we're reporting this is just looking at outputs. So we say 100 seniors were served. When you're talking about reporting to your community members or to somebody else, you want to be able to go beyond just your outputs. You want to be able to explain what changed as a result of receiving a service. So let's look at another example. Can we go to the next slide? All right, so in this example, we're stating the results in terms of outputs and outcomes. So as a result of our Tech Connectors Seniors Grant, 100 seniors gained access to critical telehealth access, and we saw a 300% increase in seniors completing virtual doctor's appointments. Things that you could ask yourself as you're reporting this kind of information is, did your data actually reflect real change for people? Things that you might ask yourself are, did people's lives improve? Did a problem decrease? Did a system become more efficient? We can move to the next slide. We're going to look at another example here. This is from one of our nonprofit organizations. It's Digital Durham in Durham, North Carolina. This is actually from their digital inclusion plan, and provides some context for some of the work that they're doing. So in their plan, they stated over 300 community members contributed to the work through focus groups and surveys. So in this, they're telling us where they got their data and their sample size. They go on to talk about community input and the involvement of a broad coalition, which is critical in the development of a plan to bridge the digital divide for all people in their city and in the county of Durham. So here, they've explained to us why we should actually care about the work we're doing. Questions you might want to ask yourself when reporting something like this, or what are some of the strategies that are going to help you be more sustainable over time? What are some real challenges that are faced by our community, and what are the things that we're hoping to solve? Are we asking the right questions of the people that we're hoping to support? So keeping in mind that community voice isn't just a box to check, it brings legitimacy and life to the story, and fosters understanding, engagement, and action from your audience. We can go on to the next slide. So Digital Durham's digital inclusion plan goes on to describe the demographic information about their participants. So here they're using some census data as a comparison. They start off by stating that they have a fairly representative sample. So that's helping us see that the data accurately are representing the characteristics of a larger population. It gives the reader the ability to compare populations to the data that they were collecting. In this case, you also might want to include other contextual information. So if you, for example, oversampled a specific population, you might want to tell your audience why. One example might be like, while the aging population makes up X% of a population, we've oversampled them here because we know that this specific issue is very important to the work that we're doing in this community. So being able to explain that in a narrative is really important. And go on to the next one. And as you begin a project, it's really important to think about your baseline data. You will need to identify how you can also collect it again in the future if that's something that is going to be important to your work. Trying to identify whether your baseline data is publicly available is important, and understanding if it's going to be collected at specific time intervals is also important. So in this example, this is actually a report that we have from it includes data from the American Community Survey, the Census, and the Digital Equity Survey in North Carolina. And here we're just sharing baseline information about specific counties that we've been working in. But again, you can use data like this as a comparison, not as a comparison to show progress, not just snapshots in time. So one of the things we're going to do as a state is also collect some of this data in the coming years so we can compare our baseline to where our counties are in the future. Other data like the ACS data are going to be collected every year and reported. And also, let's see, other questions you could ask yourself are, where were you when you started? How far have you come? And then a really important thing to consider when you're presenting information back to a community is how do you visualize this data for your audience in a way that's really easy to understand? Let me go on to the next slide. Also, when you're thinking about data trends, think about how you can demonstrate how your program has evolved or expanded its reach. Just keep in mind that stories of growth can be more powerful than just a one-time win. Questions you might ask yourself when reporting this kind of information is, are you improving specific things like specific skills, health outcomes, for example, access to internet and devices? Are you reaching more people? Are your digital navigators serving more community members? Are people more actively participating in your program, or are more people accessing your resources? Or is something even decreasing? For example, maybe homelessness or unemployment. Let me go on to the next slide. And then contextualizing your data. So I will be very transparent. I'm a mixed methods researcher, so I'm always going to advocate for using quantitative and qualitative data where it's possible and appropriate. But things you might want to ask yourself as you're thinking about how to contextualize your data are what are the added benefits of including both qualitative and quantitative data in your analysis? And again, if people have ideas, feel free to add those in the chat. For example, like numbers, those can provide you with very concrete, credible information. Think back to the American Community Survey data, the census data. It might be a needs assessment that you've conducted. But your qualitative data are really going to tell you the why about your numbers. It can paint a picture for you, it can tell a story, and it makes your numbers more tangible and meaningful for your audience. One way you could do this is using different mixed methods frameworks. I think that's a question that came up in our last webinar. That could be a completely separate webinar all in itself, but there are a couple designs that you could use if you're thinking about using a mixed methods approach. One might be an explanatory design where you collect your quantitative data first and then you use the qualitative data to explain your results. You could also use parallel designs where you're collecting both of the data simultaneously and you merge the results for triangulation. But there's lots of different ways that you can combine both quantitative and qualitative data to tell stories and testimonials and evoke emotions and show those tangible impacts as well. And then we can go on to the next slide. And it's also really important to acknowledge your limitations in what you're doing. No data set's ever going to be perfect. Identifying your limiting factors are really important to address in how you're reporting your information, also how you're addressing them. So don't be scared to talk about your lessons learned and how this might apply to future work. And just know that it's okay to make mistakes. It's how we learn. This is how we grow. And transparency also helps to build trust. So your struggles and your adaptations really do matter and helps with this commitment to continuous improvement. So now we've gotten to the fun part. And we can go to the next slide. So now we can put your critical thinking into action. So this example comes from a collective impact spotlight that was posted on the Center for Digital Equity in Charlotte's website. It goes on to say Hurricane Helene, as we know, devastated parts of North Carolina, and digital resilience became a core part of the response and recovery efforts. The storm brought damage and devastation on an unprecedented scale and was the deadliest storm in our state's history, with at least 96 North Carolinians losing their lives. The impact on our infrastructure and on our economy has been staggering, and an initial assessment indicated that the overall damage is likely to exceed $53 billion. And we can go on to the next slide. So in the wake of Helene, our community is really reminded that digital disaster preparedness is an important priority. So we're going to use your expertise to provide guidance to help restore digital infrastructure, tools, and knowledge, and to navigate recovery from this disaster. In your breakout rooms, you're going to strategize about how to address these needs and track digital recovery in a real world emergency. Let me go on to the next slide. All right, so you're going to be put into a breakout room and you're going to answer one of these 4 questions. First question is, what types of data points can be leveraged to support a needs assessment for Western counties impacted by the hurricane? What are publicly available data that can be used to understand technology needs that exist in a community? What immediate digital tools or information can be shared or implemented to address the digital and informational needs of the community? And then how can you measure and track the impacts in light of the response and recovery? You're going to have about 5 minutes. Be creative, apply what we've covered in this webinar and the past webinar, and then prepare at least one key insight to share when we come back. Do you need anything else, Jess or Kylie, before we move into breakout rooms?
We are good to go.
Awesome. Great. All right. And we're back. I know everyone probably feels like we did not have enough time to discuss this. But we had some really good insights from our group. So I'd love to hear some reflections from each of the breakout rooms. Do we want to just quickly start with the first one? So what were some data points that we felt could be leveraged to support a needs assessment in Western communities?
So we were thinking about kind of tracking broadband and internet connections, what internet service providers are even out there, who's doing what, thinking about first responders, what services are available, thinking about libraries and community centers and school closings as a way of kind of tracking what communities are in the most need and who has access to their community resources.
Yeah. And those seem like very reasonable data points too that we could actually collect. So what are some other publicly available data that could help us understand the technology needs in our community? Feel free to just take yourselves off mute. I know Samantha already talked about some. Were there any others that Samantha didn't mention?
Yeah, well, I'll just quickly speak for my breakout room. So kind of started with thinking about like what are the technology needs. So we talked about broadband, internet, laptops, smartphones, and then we also talked about electrical infrastructure. But then we circled back to how can we access data, and we kind of started walking through those, and we talked about the FCC National Broadband Map, the American Community Survey, and Megan in my breakout room also shared this fantastic hard copy map of broadband availability in, I think it was Haywood. Megan, can you help me out here? Which county was that?
Haywood County.
Yeah.
Nice. Excellent. So what are some of the digital tools or information that could be shared or implemented to address our digital and information needs?
Well, I guess I'll jump in here. Jen Bean was able to give a lot of information from the community college perspective. She specifically talked about, first of all, getting the lights immediately on and understanding what the connectivity levels are. Because without connectivity, you can't get to the outside world. So that was the main thing. And then the other part is understanding what could be salvaged, inventoried, and usable in terms of devices. So Jen, feel free, Blanca, feel free to jump in if there's anything I forgot for that part.
Sure. Just to really briefly, when we discussed this in our project in the community colleges, we actually had some colleges in the western part of the state that served as kind of disaster response hubs in some of their communities. So it was just really important for them to make sure that they were able to effectively have some connectivity. That was kind of job one from what was described to me by folks who were out that way, making sure that whatever connectivity could be restored was restored quickly, whatever devices could be salvaged were salvaged and used quickly, and that way that they could connect with the outside world, so to speak.
Awesome. And Kevin, I don't know if you want to talk, but in our group, we were talking about measuring and tracking the impacts in light of responses and recovery. One of the things that we noted is that, in a disaster, one of the things that is going to go down is probably cellular and internet service. So it's really hard to be able to track that information. We talked about, getting information directly from like people in their communities and organizations that are going out and serving and helping to support recovery. We talked about gathering data in places where people are already going to receive services, and that's a really good idea. And I know, Kevin, from the work you're doing and great, like you already are kind of coordinating a lot of that kind of stuff. And then collecting data directly from our internet service providers could be, a helpful way to understand what's happening. Did anybody want to add anything else from our group?
Talk about having a survey
Mhm.
to gather data from the people who have needs. And then, if there was a website that we can, like a flyer, we can give them where they can go to a website to get help and also to upload data of what their needs are. Like they might need blankets or something, and you just, if you don't ask, you don't know, and then that way you can go get what their needs are.
Yeah.
Um, um,
Yeah, that was really helpful. All right. Any final thoughts before we move on to our next section? These are all really great ideas. All right.
Okay. So thank you. So continuing with our theme for the day, we're going in for the knockout by crafting a really succinct message, thinking about how we can tell our story in the most concise and compelling way possible. So next slide. Thank you. So we kicked off our session today asking you for your favorite story, folktale, fable, fairy tale. I think someone else said Beauty and the Beast. I've got my bell mug today. That's my favorite too. And it wasn't just for fun. It was to get you thinking about grant narrative writing as telling a story. Compelling stories are memorable because they're engaging, they're relatable, and they're easy to retell. They're really structured. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. That makes it easy for us to follow and to then share with others. So we want you to think about your narrative writing in the same way. The most effective narratives address all components of the grant in the same way that a story goes from beginning, middle to end. And so we really want to think about making it easy for funders and reviewers to read and understand your message. So while each grant has its own specifications, most grants will require you to address the following key components listed here. But we're going to dig in a little bit deeper on the next slide. Woo! So some key components. First and foremost, the problem or need. This is really the focus, the purpose of your grant. Why is your project needed? What problem are you addressing? Why does the work matter? Then thinking about the intervention, the solution, this is your plan. What are you actually going to do? And how will it address the problem that you've identified in your community? Moving on, results, outcomes. This is a great tie-in to the SMART goals like we discussed in the first webinar. Really thinking about what are the intended outcomes. What specific changes will we see in your community or organization after your grant is completed, after your project is done. The impact significance, going a little bit bigger, how is your project making a difference? Erin was talking about this earlier, just really thinking about how people's lives are improved by the work that you're doing. And then finally, your call to action. This is really what's next. What do you need in order to move forward? So I mentioned on a previous slide the importance of an engaging message. So with stories, we think about engagement through excitement and keeping your reader in suspense. You do not want to keep your funders or grant reviewers in suspense. Instead, engagement means keeping your audience on track, making sure that they can follow your thought process from beginning to end and really understand the story you're trying to tell. So some kind of general guidelines for how to make your narrative really easy to follow. The first, use language from the prompt. It's what reviewers are going to be looking for, and it's a really great way to check yourself to make sure that you are, in fact, addressing everything that you need to. We also want to use signposting language. This can be sort of transition words, first, second, next, then. And it can also be the use of headings and subheadings to really make it obvious. What are we reading? Why are we reading? And what's coming next? We want to be specific in our language choices. Details are more powerful than generalities. And then Erin mentioned this also, like incorporating quantitative and qualitative data. So really numbers and narratives working together tell a much more compelling story and make for a much more convincing case than either on their own. And then finally, where appropriate and where possible, using participants' own words, really celebrating the authentic voices and amplifying what they have to say about their needs and your grant's potential impact. So, as an example, this comes from a policy brief based on a listening session conducted in Hertford County earlier this summer. We were asking participants about their experiences accessing and using the internet. So the report directly reflects that conversation, as you can see through our use of subheadings. They announce key findings and are really easy. They're in that bright red that make it simple for readers to figure out exactly what we're doing and why we're writing. So we've got our subheadings in there. We also have like our call out text boxes, which is a great way to kind of highlight participants' voices and their own quotes. We have specific details that 3-week service outage is a much more real problem than just like, oh, sometimes the power goes out. Like, no, we couldn't get on the internet for 3 weeks. And then we've got that mix of quant and qual with specific survey responses collected at this event. That's $69 to $300 for a monthly internet bill. And then those quotes like, we call our friend who works at the church because she works in IT. And it was great because everyone just pointed right at her because she was sitting in the listening session. They're like, this is who we call. It really shows what a community looks like and how they are working together to kind of navigate everything. So it's a really great way to do it and kind of moving forward. Whoop, whoop, where'd we go? Yeah, next slide. Yeah, we're ready. So when composing a succinct message, you really want to make sure you're including all of the most relevant key metrics needed to make your case. We've listed some on this slide that might be relevant to your project, but there are many, many more. So I'm curious, what other data are you all collecting and trying to weave into your own narratives? Whether in defending the need for your project or on the backside, explaining the impact you've had. Ooh, socioeconomic status and crime rates. That can be some really important baseline community data. Thank you. Anybody else? Students served by digital navigators, credentials earned, yes. Specific sector data, Yep. Great. I love having all the experts in the room. But yeah, if you think of any more, please feel free to continue adding them to the chat. Really share your wisdom with the rest of us. Ooh, growth in the number of participants at a specific location. Yes. And affordable internet service. We want. Okay, we'll move on. Next slide. So while a well-written paragraph is fantastic, sometimes it is not the best way to communicate your information. So it's really important to kind of ask yourself, how can you ease the mental burden for your audience? What data points do you want to highlight? What do you want people to look at first? And then how can you present your information in the most compelling way? So we'll talk a little bit more about this in coming slides, but again, keeping that audience first in mind as you're making your kind of narrative structure decisions. So some examples, this is another excerpt from the listening session policy brief, and then a couple excerpts from the formative report that we wrote for the Mideast Commission. That includes both the census, ACS data, and then also data collected from our digital equity survey. So here we have county context information listed in both paragraph and list format. While we could have incorporated all of the data into another paragraph, it is much more easily accessed and digested when presented simply as a list. And then, as mentioned earlier, we've got those gray text boxes that really call attention to key quotes, or even we have an overview of the report's key findings. Bottom left, we see population demographics. Helpful as a list, even better with the visual because you can clearly see how those percentages really break down. And it's easier for readers to understand, along with the stacked bar chart in the bottom right. Again, percentages are okay, but seeing how they visually take up space is generally much more impactful for readers, especially those who are not super familiar with reading graphics.
Thank you, Samantha. So as you begin to own the ring and deliver messaging aligned to your grant's outcome, it's critical to note that how you deliver your message about impact and effectiveness are very important when you communicate to your various audiences. Next slide, please. So again, our SMART goals, which were mentioned today, as well as in webinar 1, are the basis to understanding your reach. As a reminder, these SMART goals are the foundation for credible and impactful data communication. Without a well-defined SMART goal, your ability to measure, track, and then communicate your grant's reach and impact can be difficult. Keep in mind that your goals should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Next slide, please. So by applying these 5 principles, grantees can move beyond just collecting the data and powerfully communicate the reach and impact of your work. First of all, alignment. This principle is about strategic coherence. Every piece of data you collect and every evaluation activity you undertake should directly relate to what your grant aims to achieve, and how you contribute to the organization's overarching purpose and its mission. Proportionality is the principle refers to the level of effort for the measurement, which should be appropriate and proportionate to the size and complexity of the grant. For example, an external evaluation for a small one-time community grant would not be the best use of resources or funding. Conversely, a multi-year, multi-million-dollar grant impacting hundreds and thousands of people demands more rigorous and comprehensive evaluation. Collaboration. This principle is about proactive communication and partnership, which we've already discussed today with your funder regarding measurement and reporting. It's not just about submitting reports, but engaging dialogue about what success looks like from their perspective. And then as shared in round one webinar, measurement is just not an afterthought. It's an integral part of the grant implementation and needs dedicated resources. This includes things like budgeting for time, the staff time, software training, and potential external services. And then last but not least, if you have the resources, you can leverage appropriate digital tools to automate, organize, analyze, and present your grant data like program management software, grant management systems, using things like survey tools like Qualtrics, Google Forms, DataViz, if you have the capacity like Tableau, Power BI. Again, email, social media, and website analytics is also something to consider and think about. Next slide, please. So this is just a slide about tailoring your message. In the end, it's important that you always consider your audience and their role. From these various perspectives or frames, here's some things to think about as you begin to formulate your message and channel it. For example, your funders are invested in your success as a grantee, but they also want to see their investment is yielding results and it's managed responsibly. So they will want to see how you achieve your results. For example, they may want to see something like a detailed methodology. But keep in mind, they're also busy. So providing an executive summary or impact statement at the beginning of the report may be something beneficial and useful. Policymakers, for example, are focused on systemic change and often have limited time as well. So interpreting data is very important for policymakers. Be able to explain what the data means for broader populations and how the findings support their specific policy recommendation. Communication with policymakers need to reflect direct evidence and clearly link to their legislative priorities. And if you are writing a policy brief and white paper, keep in mind that it needs to be concise, 1 to 3 pages and 10 to 15 pages for a white paper. Practitioners, this is a crucial audience as they often the ones on the ground and implementing programs, implementing things and using tools, directly interacting with beneficiaries of the grant. So they need information that's actionable, practical, and relevant to their day-to-day work. They're less interested in high-level theories or broad policy implications and more concerned to how to and what's working. Preferred channels of communication include things like workshops, training sessions, manuals, guidebooks, online portals, resource libraries, webinars, utilizing email newsletters to kind of update the success and highlights of the work. And last but not least, the community needs to understand how your grant directly benefits them. So they're looking for relevance, transparency, as Erin mentioned before, and a sense of shared progress. So preferred channel of communication for community members include things like community meetings and events. Consider sharing relatable stories that Samantha mentioned to show clear demonstrations of direct benefit. Use accessible language, is just going to go into a little bit in the next slide. It's also very important. So if you have some examples of things that have not been mentioned or an audience that may not have also been mentioned, please put that in the chat. We would love to hear your ideas about that. And then I'll have Jess kind of take us away to the next couple slides.
Hey everyone, I'm gonna be quick so we can have some time for Q&A, but as Erin mentioned, it's important that we consider accessibility and data visualization. So this means designing visuals, designing a message in words that can be understood and interacted with and by anyone. So here's just some quick ideas or like how to sort of clean design, annotations, multiple formats. We need to make sure that the content is readable and easy to understand and using clear, simple language. So, if folks want to think about, what additional strategies could be useful to ensure your audience reaches the widest, or your message reaches the widest possible audience. So when I talking about multiple formats, Sam and Erin, both Erins have given some great examples. And I just want to show another quick example, which is Land of Sky's digital inclusion plan, which is done in a story map format. So it's interesting here, you can scroll, different maps and data sets pop up. It's just more interactive than a static PDF. And Kylie has that in the chat if you want to scroll through. But this is an example of how to keep things not just necessarily in paragraph chunks, right? And then this is a really big topic is about digital accessibility and accessibility in general. And we want to make sure, again, that reports and messages are accessible to everyone with different abilities. And so, again, using clear and plain language, there are tools out there that you can even like post, copy and paste in your content and be like, is this readable, with someone to someone with a high school education. And they'll tell you, like, it'll spit out like, hey, no, these sentences really hard to understand, right? um, and then thinking about things like color contrast. If folks are can't see color, you don't want to rely just on color to convey meaning. There's also necessary to make sure things have correct color contrast, and there are colorblind friendly palettes. Same with other points of accessibility of font size and type. Some fonts are just really hard to read, right? Or people do it really, really small. And then considering alternative text and descriptions, like if you have an image, make sure that there's an alternative text so that someone using a screen reader can read that. Now, again, this is a really big topic, so we put some resources here. There's an inclusion hub, which has a great guide to talk about the different types of inclusion you should be thinking about when you're tailoring our outreach and marketing. Also, we've linked to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which help you follow the law in terms of digital accessibility. We'll also have in the follow-up email, there's actually an upcoming webinar next week that talks specifically about this in relation to digital inclusion work. So now I'm going to pass it back. Yeah, and again, if there's other accessibility examples you can think of or resources, please share.
Awesome. Well, we've only got a couple minutes left. So the next slide, again, we're going to share the slides with you so you can explore these links on your own. But here are just some examples of information that might be helpful for all of you. And I just wanted to thank everyone for coming today, and sharing. We had some great ideas, and I just look forward to working with all of you in the future. So we're going to open it up to questions, comments, suggestions. I'll stay on for a little bit longer if folks want to chat. But again, thank you all for joining us today. So feel free to, if you do have questions, feel free to raise your hand or take yourself off mute. I don't know if anyone from the team has anything else that they wanted to share. If not, we'll just hang around here for a couple more minutes.
Folks are showing a lot of love in the chat, Erin. Matt said that he felt like he took a master's class and within the 2 sessions. So thank you, Matt.
Sure, it's going to take
Hopefully cheaper and more accessible.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot to digest in 2 hours.
Yes, yes. That's okay. That's okay.
And I'll just say, I as someone who has a lot of grant reports due in the coming months, I'll be using this information myself as well. So thank you.
Yeah, I definitely think another webinar on how to use mixed methods to report your data could be useful.
Not that you're biased at all, Erin.
No, it's fine. Mixed methods are the best.
Perfect. And folks, we'll have a follow-up survey that you'll get probably tomorrow, and then we'll send another reminder when our videos are uploaded. But please, in that survey, mixed methods, diving down and deeper into something that was talked about today or last week, please let us know. We'd love to continue offering really practical resources like this.
Oh, great question in the chat from Terry Cox. How do you all feel about leveraging AI for grant applications and reporting?
That is a very good question. I think AI can be useful for helping to summarize things that personally I've already put into words. My own experience is it's not necessarily accurate when you ask it to do stuff. So I mean, I think it can be helpful, a helpful tool, but just kind of like using Wikipedia, like don't use it as a main source. I don't know if others want to chime in.
Yeah. Unfortunately, AI is only as good as its creators and the data it has available. So it's really helpful for working with your own work. Like, I already did this. Can you, like, I use it a lot when I'm like, I need to get this down to 250 words. Like, get me started. Um,
Or like helping with an executive summary might be a really good example. Like, here's a 30-page report I just wrote. Can you help identify like the main points? Because I've already written it. I know what should be in it.
So I would say two things to add to that, which is first of all, I wouldn't share anything that I'm not ready to share publicly. Any sensitive information, I wouldn't put that into AI. So if I was going to use it, then I'll probably like replace things that are sensitive or personal information like XXX. And then also, even when you use it to summarize, there are times when the AI is going to interpret, a particular sentence in a different way. So you always want to go back and check to make sure that it's still representing what you had in mind.
That was a very good point, Arazi. Like, yeah, definitely do not put any sensitive information into AI. Oh, and Kylie mentioned her partners at Cramden are offering AI classes in the summer. So definitely take advantage of that. And I believe some of our new that are about to be published digital literacy standards, I believe, have something related to AI with them. So we'll be creating some training and content around that. So be on the lookout. Yeah, that was a really good question.
Yeah, that was a great question. And now I'm like, oh, we should definitely include that in future.
Now we have
future
another
webinars.
webinar. If we do, we'll bring in Emma Broughton and her team. They could do a really good webinar on AI.
I love this metaphor that Rebecca put in the chat that Lucas uses, says, prompting participants to think of AI like a really smart, confident friend who doesn't always have the right answer.
Yes. Great. And sometimes hallucinates. I will say I play with AI a lot using content or topics that I know a lot about and keep playing with it until it starts breaking just to see what its limitations are. But I always start with something I'm an expert in. But yeah,
because it tries real hard.
it does. And it feels very confident.
My favorite is when like I'll ask like, hey, what are some like potential like papers I could go read? And it will give me
It's terrible.
real scholars and papers that are
Don't
almost
exist.
right.
Yeah,
Like
or don't exist.
not a real thing, but like it gets close. But
I've had it cite like give me I've asked it to give me a summary on like a topic I know a lot about and then cite its sources. And it's cited real sources, but the sources don't match what it's talking about.
yeah,
Yeah.
it tries.
It was real hard. Well, this was exciting.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, this has been a great talk.
Yeah, and as Kylie said, please fill out surveys and let us know, if you'd like to see similar or, you know, the same content or anything else, you know, related to measuring your impact, but also related to digital inclusion and digital opportunity content in general. Kylie and I are always looking to figure out how to offer most relevant and needed webinar information, either online or at our annual convenings as well.
Thanks, y'all.
All right, thanks everyone.
Everybody.